Opening traces of ancient spaceships. Allow yourself to settle in deeply. Take a slow, gentle breath and let your mind drift into the infinite river of time. Tonight, we journey back to the forgotten chapters of our world, to a time before memory began. We often imagine that spacecraft are the proud achievements of our modern age. Yet if we peer through the misty veils of history, we catch glimpses of incredible flying machines that graced the skies tens of thousands of years ago. In the quiet whispers of legend, we find the enchanting magic carpets of ancient Arabia, the celestial wheels of Ezekiel, and the magnificent Vimanas, those mystical chariots described in the sacred texts of India and China. Could it be that, long before our time, ancient civilizations possessed a science so advanced it remains beyond our understanding? The world is scattered with silent relics, artifacts that seem to speak of a lost era, where the earth and the stars were not so far apart. Were these mysterious ancestors the true pioneers of space travel? And if so, just how far did their golden vessels carry them into the vast, velvety darkness of the cosmos? Close your eyes now. Let your spirit soar upon the wings of these ancient legends as we drift together into the peaceful mysteries of the past. Vimana. Legends and mythical tales will gradually be weathered by the dust of time. Yet the stories powerful enough leave only a faint blur. They do not truly vanish from the current of history. Indian civilization, one of the deepest and most expansive on the planet, has indeed left humanity awestruck. And within the history of that civilization, their sacred ancient texts, known as the Vedas, speak of astonishing spacecraft. One of the machines that helped ancient people travel anywhere in the world, even from one planet to another, was the magical vehicle called Vimana. In the history of ancient India, there is an old text known as the Vaimanika Shastra, which describes strange craft said to have come to our planet 6,000 years ago. While many remain skeptical of Vimana's existence, millions around the world believe that thousands of years ago, ships piloted by gods visited ancient humanity. In Hindu belief, the gods used the Vimana to journey between the heavens and the earth. For that reason, Vimana is also known by a far more poetic name, the Chariot of the Gods. With the help of Vimana craft, ancient astronauts are said to have traveled to many different places on our planet, spreading knowledge and enabling primitive civilizations to make unprecedented advances that even surpass modern imagination. Vimana is not only mentioned in the Vedas, its existence is also described in the Mahabharata, the great epic that contains the essence of Indian civilization itself. One passage states, "At Rama's command, the splendid chariot immediately soared from the mountaintop into the blue clouds with a thunderous clang." Another passage records Vimana, the spacecraft of another god. Bhima not only flew, but also shone with a dazzling light like the sun, and produced a sound like a great thunderclap. If all of this were merely legend, it is difficult to explain why Vimana appears again in the Vaimanika Shastra, one of the ancient writings that reads like a study of flying devices. According to this text, Vimana was a flying apparatus that could move without drawing power from an external source, traveling from place to place, even from one world to another. And it does not stop there. In this document, Vimana is described in ways even more startling. After examining many ancient materials, Dr. V. Raghavan pointed out that the Vimana is depicted with 31 components of a flying device, including an illustrated simulation showing the craft from below. The text also lists 16 types of metals required to build such a vehicle. Yet only 3 are known today. The rest have not been verified. Krishnamurti, an aeronautics professor at the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, agreed with Raghavan's interpretation, and insisted it was entirely true. Murty studied the ancient Vedas and other Sanskrit texts closely in order to investigate aviation spacecraft airplanes and ancient astronauts. From that work, he stated research into ancient Sanskrit writings has convinced me that ancient Indians truly knew the secret of building spacecraft, and that the flying devices depicted were drawn in the manner of craft from another planet. However, the question that troubles modern scientists is not whether Vimana existed, but what kind of energy it used to operate if it truly did exist in the past. After all, it is described as rather large and bulky. According to another Sanskrit text discovered in the early 20th century, Vimana was believed to be an advanced aerodynamic flying device, like a rocket capable of moving between planets and supposedly created by extraterrestrials. Another document revealed by G.R. Josier in 1952 also claimed that Vimana's propulsion systems were mercury vortex engines, a concept similar to engines powered by electrical energy. Even so, many believe the ancient Vimana may have tapped into a source of electricity that was stronger, easier to obtain, and free. Can you guess where that abundant energy might have come from? It sounds absurd, yet one hypothesis suggests that the gigantic pyramids on the Giza plateau were free charging stations supplying power to the Vimana. The universe still holds far too many mysteries. Notably, a few years ago, Chinese researchers discovered ancient Sanskrit documents dating back thousands of years in Lhasa, Tibet. These materials were sent to Chandigarh University for translation, and the results reportedly stunned the scientific community. According to Dr. Ruth Rayna, the translated documents were said to be blueprints for a spacecraft capable of traveling among the stars. In the translated texts, the energy system of these space vessels is described as being based on anti-gravity technology, built on a system similar to Lagima, a power said to exist within the human self, strong enough to oppose all gravitational forces. What makes this especially intriguing is that in Hindu belief, Lagima is the power that allows a person to rise freely into the air. Dr. Rayna explained that on these machines called astras, humans could travel to any planet. However, the documents do not describe any specific means of travel or communication between planets. The one clear exception is a journey from Earth to the Moon mentioned in the texts. Even now, researchers have not determined whether this was a journey that actually took place or merely a plan. If that journey truly happened, then the history of aerospace as understood by modern humanity could be changed forever. Indian scientists made great efforts to collect and preserve as much detail as possible from these ancient writings in order to continue research. But it seems the task has become more difficult. China announced that other sections of the texts would be preserved separately to support research for their own space programs. Moreover, another great Indian epic, the Ramayana, contains an extremely detailed story about a voyage to the moon by Vimana and a battle on the moon with Asvin, an Atlantean spacecraft. Could it really be such a strange coincidence? It all seems irrational until humanity encounters astonishing archaeological evidence. In the famous Taos tunnels in Ecuador, a model of a modern aircraft was reportedly discovered and dated to roughly 6,000 to 12,000 years old. Yes, you did not mishear. A modern aircraft, yet bearing the age of ancient civilizations. Dr. Arthur Poisley of the Institute of Aeronautics and Space Travel in New York examined and tested the model from its wings and tail to the cockpit and windshield. He was shocked by how closely its structure resembled that of a famous bomber aircraft. This raises a question: could we recreate and apply those ancient yet advanced technologies in the modern era? Nothing is impossible. Another fascinating Sanskrit text, the Samarangana Sutradhara states that the body of a Vimana should be shaped like a large bird and made of lightweight material. Strong and durable are the two most accurate words to describe it. Inside a Mercury engine was to be installed with an iron heating device beneath it. The latent power within Mercury would create whirlwinds that enabled motion, and a man seated inside could travel a very great distance through the sky. The Vimana's movements included vertical ascent and descent, as well as tilting forward or backward. With such a craft, humans could travel through the air, and celestial beings in the sky could descend to Earth at any time. In this description, Vimana could not only hover like a helicopter, it even possessed formidable capabilities for both attack and defense. In Hakatha, the law code of ancient Babylon, there is a clear statement: to test fly on a spacecraft is truly wonderful. Knowledge of flight is one of our ancient inheritances. It is a gift from the gods. We received it from them. It is like a means to save many lives. From these descriptions, the gods appear as saviors who brought advanced technologies. But if the god theory is inaccurate, then from whom did ancient humans receive Vimana? Could other forces in the vast universe have been the true gods in the subconscious mind of the ancients? Professor Dilip Kumar Kanjilal also shared his findings regarding the Ramayana. According to him, Pushpaka Vimana was an enormous aircraft large as a major city and able to carry an unlimited number of people. 3 flying cities known as Vimana were said to be space vessels created and used by the forces of demons. 1 city remained in a fixed orbit in the sky, another moved across the heavens, and a third was permanently fixed on the ground. They were anchored like modern spacecraft at specific latitudes and longitudes. The arrow of Shiva is described clearly as a blazing rocket launched from one of those special satellites. Above all, it is a faint remnant of a once prosperous civilization, destroyed in battles from the distant past. If these ancient Vimana were beyond human scale, then what purpose did their makers have in creating them? Were they meant to access the natural energy of our planet? And what would it mean if thousands of years ago, ancient flying machines used Earth's natural energy to recharge? In fact, it is possible that ancient structures such as pyramids were vast energy transmitters, providing fuel for ancient Vimana. Interestingly, certain types of stone, such as ancient paving stones, have reportedly been unearthed that can hold electrical charge and could in theory be used for charging. What if certain locations on Earth were deliberately arranged to generate what are called magnetic vortices or electric field ley lines? Perhaps there is an even greater mystery behind the countless ancient pyramids, India's monuments, massive stone slabs, stone statues, stelae tall stone towers, and innumerable other stone-made ruins. Could all these structures across India and the world have been built for no reason at all? They may have been created for a special scientific purpose to transmit enormous amounts of energy. Many researchers argue that the sophisticated ancient stoneworks of the Inca Egyptians, East Indians, Maya, and other civilizations were not merely aesthetic, but served another specific function. The clearest evidence, they say, is the Great Pyramid of Giza, an ancient power plant. In other words, a Tesla-like power station built thousands of years ago. This pyramid is massive in structure and is said to have used Earth's natural properties to generate vast amounts of energy that, according to the theory, was used by the ancient Egyptians and Maya around the world thousands of years ago. However, this theory is still rejected by the majority of researchers. Many proponents maintain that complex ancient stone artifacts attributed to the Inca Egyptians, East Indians, Maya, and other civilizations served a specific purpose beyond beauty. Yet mainstream researchers have firmly dismissed the idea. Some even claim that Vimana was simply another form of unidentified flying object, and that extraterrestrials have indeed visited our civilization for thousands of years. If we approach the history of ancient civilizations from another angle, we may find that civilizations across the globe were in reality extraordinarily complex and used advanced technologies long before mainstream science rediscovered them. And the mysteries of Vimana once again suggest that modern humanity's understanding of ancient civilizations remains severely limited. Advanced technologies in geology, physics, electrochemistry, and higher astronomy may have appeared and even been widely used thousands of years ago. And so the mystery of Vimana seems to reach a dead end because no modern researcher can truly explain it. Until early 2015, when a report presented by Captain Anand Bodas and Ameya Jadhav at a discussion titled Ancient Science Through Sanskrit at a prestigious scientific conference, the Indian Science Congress sparked a fierce wave of controversy. The report claimed that advanced aviation and space travel had been developed by ancient Indians, and its basis was precisely the records of Vimana found in the Vedas. Captain Bodas further asserted that ancient Indians were the true creators of the modern airplane. Later, these advanced technologies were forgotten over time amid the upheavals of history. Though the claims met strong opposition, many also argued that careful review and study of ancient texts is worthwhile because knowledge is always evolving. And if humanity wishes to uncover the truth, there may be no choice but to race against time, investigating and bringing these mysteries into the light before they are buried forever. Ezekiel's Wheel. The story of a flying palace called Vimana may still not be enough to convince most people that a true spacecraft ever existed in the distant past. But if the Vedas of Indian civilization mention Vimana, then the account of Ezekiel's Wheel is perhaps one of the most captivating stories in the Bible, especially when viewed through the lens of modern technology. And like Vimana, Ezekiel's Wheel is also regarded as one of the mysterious ancient spaceships that modern humanity longs to decode. Did Ezekiel's Wheel truly exist in this world, or was it simply one of the biblical tales meant to teach later generations? No one knows the full truth, yet there is a folk song passed down for generations among African Americans that goes, Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. Now the little wheel run by faith and the big wheel run by the grace of God. Ezekiel saw the wheel in the middle of the air. Whenever we begin to approach ancient legends or texts about wonders that seem impossible on this planet, two main viewpoints tend to emerge. First, many believe that astonishing achievements or technologies far beyond the era of our ancestors were only possible with help from an outside force beyond our world. Look at the Great Pyramids in Egypt, still wrapped in unanswered mysteries, or the Sanxingdui site in China. Could these be the clearest signs of intervention by visitors from another planet? In other words, if we interpret ancient history through modern eyes and refuse to stay within conventional boundaries, we may glimpse a possibility that humanity's distant ancestors were once visited by a highly advanced extraterrestrial race. However many others choose a technological explanation, they argue that Vimana or Ezekiel's Wheel were in fact primitive spacecraft vehicles invented long ago by humans themselves, capable of moving through different spaces, perhaps even different times. If that were true, then the universe would still hold mysteries far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Returning to the folk song we mentioned, it shares notable overlaps with the ancient biblical story. Such a visitation is described with striking specificity in the book of Ezekiel. In it, Ezekiel recounts the image of the Merkaba chariot, the throne chariot of God, rushing toward him. This chariot has been interpreted in many different ways. Many believers say it was simply an ordinary chariot carrying their god, but many ancient astronaut theorists believe it may have been a spacecraft or some kind of space shuttle that landed on Earth in the far distant past. One of the most famous authors to support that idea was Erich von Däniken, who presented what he considered persuasive evidence through his research offering an alternative explanation for the book of Ezekiel and for what Ezekiel may have witnessed. In his book Chariots of the Gods, the Swiss author proposed that it was a space shuttle, not a divine chariot. In truth, von Däniken's theory sounded so astonishing that it was hard to believe it could be real, and it drew endless controversy. Yet it also mattered because it awakened the interest of a NASA scientist, Joseph Blumrich. Blumrich decided to investigate in order to disprove von Däniken, but things did not go as he expected. The deeper he studied, the more convinced he became by the theory. What began as a search for counter-evidence gradually turned into belief that Ezekiel's wheel was a genuine ancient spacecraft. In the end, he began writing a book of his own. Through his research, Blumrich soon concluded that Ezekiel may have been describing the landing of a spacecraft on Earth, not merely a chariot in the sky. Back to Ezekiel's text itself, it is among the earliest ancient works in which the narrator speaks directly about events from a personal point of view. In it, Ezekiel describes seeing a chariot descend from the heavens and move toward him. This chariot was controlled by a figure who looked like a man. The book states, from the midst of it came the likeness of 4 living creatures. They had the likeness of a man. Everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings. Their feet were straight, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like burnished bronze. When they went, their wings touched one another. Each one went straight forward. They did not turn when they went. If it was truly an ordinary person, why didn't Ezekiel assert with certainty that he saw a man? What could that mean? The answer, perhaps, is that they were not human, yet carried a human-like form in nature, making it difficult for an ordinary person to give a precise conclusion, even after seeing them with his own eyes. Ezekiel's descriptions naturally spark modern associations with extraterrestrials. For ancient people, however, it would have been too strange and unprecedented. This is also the interpretation offered by ancient astronaut theorists. Moreover, Ezekiel describes the descent in remarkable detail. The storm's lightning and brilliant radiance he mentions resemble what a modern spacecraft might look like when landing. Clearly, it could have been misunderstood, like many unfamiliar technologies would have been in the past. This is easy to understand because people living on Earth thousands of years ago had nothing comparable. Their scientific thinking differed from ours. Still, the possibility of a spiritual phenomenon cannot be completely ruled out. What is especially striking is how Ezekiel describes the energy fire of the chariot as something like glowing metal. The book states clearly, "I looked, and behold, a storm wind came out of the north, a great cloud with fire flashing forth continually, and a brightness all around it, and in the midst of it, as it were, glowing metal in the midst of the fire. I heard the sound of their wings like the sound of great waters, like the voice of the Almighty, like the sound of a host. When they stood, they let down their wings. Indeed, whether you hear it once or many times, it is hard to deny how familiar Ezekiel's words sound to us. They resemble the way we describe modern spacecraft during launch and landing. What Ezekiel called glowing metal could be the sparks and blazing effects we often see when rockets ignite. Yet Ezekiel did not only provide an astonishing account of a spacecraft. Ancient astronaut theorists also point to another part of the description. As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the earth beside each creature with its 4 faces. The appearance of the wheels and their construction was like sparkling beryl. All 4 had the same likeness as if a wheel were within a wheel. When they went in any of their 4 directions. The wheels did not turn as they went. Their rims were full of eyes all around. Over the heads of the living creatures, there was the likeness of a dome shining like crystal. When the living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved. And when the living creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose. Wherever the spirit would go, they went. So was Ezekiel's account simply a story about an encounter between humanity and God preserved to teach later generations? Was the wheel so much like a spacecraft only meant to emphasize divine holiness? From a modern scientific perspective, the answer would surely be no. However, stories fade with time when no convincing physical evidence is unearthed. Yet not long ago, NASA's Solar Terrestrial Observatory reportedly captured a fleeting image of a wheel-like structure. The object's size and its path across the sun led some observers to conclude that the observatory had recorded an alien craft. Those who believe in UFOs were thrilled, and many insisted that Ezekiel's wheel had returned to visit our planet after thousands of years away. But not everyone agreed. UFO researcher Scott Brando argued that what people saw was merely a reflection. He claimed it was a recurring imaging artifact caused by an internal reflection of a planet. NASA responded that the strange geometric object was indeed an internal reflection of Venus in the telescope's optics, an effect that had been seen many times before. NASA's explanation, grounded in scientific reasoning, effectively dismissed the idea that the biblical flying chariot had reappeared. And yet there remains something modern science still cannot fully explain what Ezekiel truly saw. All of his descriptions of the wheel God used feel almost like a dream. Did Ezekiel possess such a rich vocabulary and such skillful imagery that what he witnessed became ambiguous to people separated from him by thousands of years? Were those visions a visitation by extraterrestrials in a strange spacecraft? We may never find a satisfying answer. If Ezekiel's wheel truly described an ancient spacecraft, then everything we assume about the past would require an immense shift. The mysteries of the magical Vimana and Ezekiel's wheel alone are enough to persuade many modern minds that spacecraft may indeed have existed in ancient times. And in old oral traditions, the flying carpet is also mentioned again and again. But unlike Vimana or Ezekiel's wheel, the flying carpet is not portrayed as a colossal ancient spaceship. It is simply a familiar means of travel for thieves or Eastern oddities long before the image of the flying broom appeared and replaced it. In the nightly dreams of children, the flying carpet has surely appeared more than once. Walt Disney's animated film, Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, released in 1992, carried the image of the flying carpet across the world. Since then, the flying carpet has become one of the most famous treasures in the Eastern fairy tale tradition. This wondrous object is strongly associated with mystical stories from the Middle East, yet it is also mentioned in myths across many different civilizations throughout history. The film also helped create the misconception that flying carpets originated in the world of 1001 Nights. However, the truths about the flying carpet, as well as what modern people understand about Vimana and Ezekiel's wheel, remain far too scarce. Contrary to what most of us assume, the flying carpet is actually only a faint detail in 1001 Nights. For example, Antoine Galland's manuscript, the first French translation in Europe between 1704 and 1717, regarded as the oldest compilation containing 282 tales from 1001 Nights, does not describe flying carpets in detail. In the original version of Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, the kidnapping of Princess Badroulbadour and her groom on their wedding night does not take place on a flying carpet, but on their wedding bed. The genie uses magic to turn the bed into something that can fly through the air. The miraculous flying carpet only appears for the first time in modern versions of 1001 Nights, most notably Disney's 1992 Aladdin. It seems the studio wanted the fairy tale to feel more exciting, adding the flying carpet to heighten the thrill. Yet the discovery of a mysterious ancient scroll suggested that the flying carpet might not be purely a fictional product of 1001 Nights. It may have truly existed in the world. Certain real traces within this long-standing legend were said to have been found by a French explorer named Henri Bach in Iran. According to Asian Legacy, Bach discovered scrolls carefully preserved in an underground chamber beneath the ancient assassin castle at Alamut, near the Caspian Sea. The scroll was written in the early 13th century by a Jewish scholar named Isaac ben Sharira. These manuscripts appeared to shed light on the true story behind the flying carpet, a treasure long believed to belong only to the fairy tale world of 1001 Nights. And as expected, the truth never sleeps forever. A small disturbance is sometimes enough for everything to become clear soon after. The discovery plunged the scientific world into one of the fiercest debates ever seen. Based on Professor Dr. Septimus's English translation from Persian Septimus, being a renowned linguist, a conference was quickly convened at the School of Oriental and African Studies, drawing famous scholars from around the world. Bayqu's discovery was attacked by many historians who insisted the manuscripts were forged. Professor Septimus, meanwhile, emphasized that such new findings must be studied carefully. The manuscripts are currently preserved at the Leonardo da Vinci Institute of Technology in Trieste, Italy. According to the manuscripts, ancient Islamic rulers believed flying carpets were objects of dark sorcery created by demons. As a result, their existence was denied, their science was suppressed, and even the people who produced them were persecuted. From then on, any evidence connected to them was erased thoroughly and systematically. In Ben Sharira's chronicle, the carpet is said to have first been mentioned in two earlier ancient works. The first was a book of Proverbs collected by Shamshata. The second was a book of ancient dialogues compiled by Josephus. Tragically, neither of these works has survived to the present day for comparison. If one looks more closely at the manuscripts tied to 1001 Nights, King Solomon appears to be the earliest historical figure linked to flying carpets. In Ben Sharira's version, written before the 8th century BCE, the legendary Queen of Sheba had a trusted assistant, an alchemist who could command a small carpet to glide through the air. One day, the man brought the queen a small brown carpet that could hover low to the ground. The queen and her attendants were delighted. They wondered whether a person could sit on it and asked him to continue improving the treasure. Years later, the alchemist succeeded in making it carry a human rider, and Queen Sheba ordered him to craft a flying carpet as a gift for King Solomon as a sign of her love. The carpet was described as being woven from blue silk, adorned with gold and silver and elaborate gemstones. It was also said to be vast enough for the king's guests to sit upon. However, when the precious gift arrived, Solomon was deeply occupied with the construction of the Temple of Jerusalem. He did not receive the present in person, instead leaving the matter to one of his courtiers. When she heard of the king's cold reception, Queen Sheba was heartbroken and decided she would no longer care about any flying carpets, no matter how miraculous they might be. With the queen's patronage gone, the alchemists and the carpet makers ceased their work. From then on, flying carpets and the technology to make them began to fade away. Some theories suggest the artisans wandered for many years and eventually settled somewhere in Mesopotamia, in what is now Iraq and Syria. They retained fragments of the knowledge, but lacked resources and could only produce low-quality hovering carpets, still enough to arouse the curiosity of common people. This may be the most realistic story about the origin of the flying carpet that modern people still whisper to one another. In another version, Solomon's miraculous flying carpet was a gift from God. It could carry as many as 40,000 people through the air at any time. Doesn't that sound like a modern spacecraft? After gaining such a carpet, Solomon's arrogance grew day by day until God decided to punish him. While the carpet was flying in the sky, God made it shake violently, causing 40,000 people to fall to their deaths. Beyond transportation, flying carpets were also said to be used as weapons in war. A clear example is a story involving King Phraates II of the Parthian Empire in the late 2nd century BCE. In 130 BCE, Phraates went to war against Antiochus VII of the Seleucid Empire. Phraates allegedly used a magical carpet to descend from the heights of the Zagros Mountains to battle the enemy, and the carpet fought like an aircraft, equipped with modern weapons, unleashing fire and lightning. In another tale, King Shapur of the Sassanid Empire in the 3rd century also possessed a miraculous flying carpet. One night, Shapur flew into a Roman army camp and abducted Emperor Valerian, who was sleeping, leaving him stunned beyond belief. Countless variants like these have led most of us to assume the flying carpet is merely a product of boundless imagination. But is that really the truth? Ben Sharira's chronicle includes certain passages describing the operating principles of the flying carpet. Unfortunately, most of the script used in those sections lies beyond modern understanding. If it could truly be deciphered, the truth about flying carpets might finally come to light. What we do know is that a flying carpet was made on a loom like ordinary carpets in Persia. What made it special was the process of producing the fibers. The carpet makers reportedly discovered a special clay with extremely strong magnetism, taken from streams high in the mountains, crucially entirely natural and untouched by human hands. They would heat it to a temperature described as beyond the 7th layer of hell in a boiling Grecian oil cauldron in order to remove its diamagnetic properties, grind it fine, and dye it into wool fibers before weaving. The Earth itself is like a magnet with countless magnetic forces passing through it from the North Pole to the South Pole. Thus, once the carpet was woven, it would be pushed by Earth's magnetic field and hover in midair. Depending on how much clay was used, it might float a few dozen centimeters or rise several meters above the ground. The driving force along magnetic lines would function like invisible rails in the sky. It sounds miraculous, doesn't it? Ben Sharira also wrote that the Great Library of Alexandria, founded by Ptolemy I, possessed a large number of flying carpets intended for its readers. They could borrow them to glide up and down between shelves, reaching books with ease. The library was housed inside a ziggurat, an ancient Sumerian structure from Mesopotamia, built mainly of mud bricks, and it contained 40,000 scrolls. The ceiling was so high that people supposedly preferred to read while hovering in the air. The manuscripts were so numerous that it was said even 1,000 readers working day and night for 50 years would not finish them all. If such a vast library truly existed, humanity would have lived in a world of extraordinary magic. The library was later damaged during a civil war under the Roman Emperor Aurelian through the destruction carried out by an Islamic general. This man burned papyrus to heat 600 bathhouses of Alexandria, and the intelligent carpets terrified the scholars of the time. In the end, the carpets were disposed of, thrown into the sea. According to Ben Sharira, flying carpets were welcomed by merchants in the early 13th century, when a prince of Turan used them to attack an enemy fortress by positioning archers on carpets as airborne cavalry. In 1213, Prince Behrouz of Khorasan in eastern Persia fell secretly in love with a young Jewish woman named Ashira, whose father was a maker of flying carpets. Behrouz defied royal tradition and married her. Afterward, his father-in-law wove 2 flying carpets using the finest wool and clay woven on a bamboo frame to make them stronger. Behrouz then stationed 48 carefully trained archers trained by a Japanese master on the finished carpets. Once the archers were in position, he assembled his soldiers and issued each man his equipment: 2 sharp steel arrows tipped with snake venom straps made from layered delta-gut sand and daggers. 2 men were assigned per carpet, one seated in front and one behind, and some carried fireballs. Behrouz formed what became the world's first 4 airborne cavalry squadrons and launched a war against the neighboring state of Demsa. The archers led the assault. They struck the fortress, darting in and out freely through the air, cutting down defenders and throwing fireballs into the compound until it burned, securing victory. After witnessing such an unprecedented battle, the public, especially merchants, began paying much closer attention to flying carpets. They saw that traveling by carpet was truly safer and far faster than camels. This demand motivated artisans to weave larger carpets to meet users' needs. However, increased load made the carpets slower and lowered their ceiling. Still, some craftsmen discovered secrets to make them faster. Once many on the ground reportedly witnessed a group of cloaked men flying from Samarkand to Isfahan at a speed like a whirlwind, an event said to be confirmed in a rare 18th century text. So where in the river of history did real flying carpets drift away to until they survived only as fairy tales? Although carpets were woven and sold until the late 13th century, their main customers were largely outside the mainstream due to economic constraints. People wanted horses and camels as standard transport. The reason was that certain Arab families closely tied to rulers grew rich from massive livestock estates, supplying hundreds of thousands of horses and camels each year to armies, merchants, and the lower classes. Some Egyptian royal clans owned camel farms and held total monopoly over camel supply across the Islamic Empire. None of these families wanted their privileges threatened by a small group of poor artisans making flying carpets. To protect their economic power, they pressured the craftsmen until carpet production could no longer continue. Through propaganda and suppression by these horse and camel-breeding families, the Islamic middle class began to avoid flying carpets by the mid-8th century. The Arabian horse market boomed, and camel prices rose sharply. Ben Sharira notes that a strange incident around this time further ruined the carpet's reputation. On a bright Friday afternoon in Baghdad, the marketplace was bustling with fruit buyers, cloth merchants, and a slave auction. Suddenly, a man appeared, flying rapidly on a carpet straight toward the tallest tower of the royal palace. It was none other than a poor soldier who had once served there. He had been caught holding the youngest princess's hand, and the eunuchs had thrown him out in humiliation. When the news reached the Islamic king, he was furious and imprisoned her in a tower. The soldier, a young Kurd named Mustafa, once shamed, had returned. He swept to the tower, helped the girl climb out the window, and flew away amid the guards' shock and the crowd's roaring cheers. The royal guards pursued, but the carpets vanished into the high clouds, powerless and humiliated that their most advanced weapons could do nothing against a cheap carpet. The palace soldiers took revenge by hunting down and killing everyone involved in producing and trading flying carpets. Only 3 artisans survived and escaped to Iran. Later, the already fading technique suffered yet another blow. In the 13th century, to protect themselves and their families, the remaining artisans chose to disappear into anonymity and to weave no more flying carpets at all. The stories of flying carpets may persuade listeners more easily than the tales of Vimanas or Ezekiel's wheel, but all 3 share a clear similarity. Whether they truly existed remains a question that still cannot be fully answered. And if flying carpets did exist, surely modern people would have found a way to rediscover the lost weaving method. If that day ever came, we would move with astonishing speed and convenience without ever worrying about traffic again. The flying carpet appears in the fairy tales of 1001 Nights, and yet it is also linked in certain stories to King Solomon. But the legends do not stop at flying carpets. There are also traditions claiming that this legendary king possessed something even more astonishing, his own space shuttle, as if from the modern age. So did Solomon own a flying carpet, like the one associated with 1001 Nights, or did he have a modern-style shuttle? For now, let's set aside the questions surrounding the mythical flying carpet and travel back into the past to explore the mystery of King Solomon's shuttle. In the Bible, Solomon is the wise ruler of the wondrous kingdom of Israel, one of the brightest stars in the ancient Near East. He was so revered that people from all over the world came to pay him homage and listen to the wisdom God had placed in his heart. The kingdom founded by his father, King David, reached the height of power and prosperity under Solomon's reign. Perhaps that is why Solomon received such extraordinary praise. He surpassed all the kings of the earth in wealth and wisdom. And so they offered him gifts of gold and silver, fine robes, weapons, and rare spices, making him one of the 3 wealthiest kings in history. Solomon truly stands as a legendary figure in the Bible. But it goes further than that. Beyond unimaginable riches, Scripture portrays Solomon as a great sage. In Jerusalem, he built the famous Temple of Solomon, which became the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant, the spiritual center of the young united kingdom of Israel. Jewish people loved him because he built the first temple for their faith. For Christians, he is counted among the wisest kings in the Old Testament. And in Islam, he is also regarded as a great prophet. And yet, strangely, a figure so great seems to vanish like vapor beneath the sun. To this day, no archaeological proof clearly tied to Solomon or his vast kingdom has been found. At most, people have uncovered only faint traces, perhaps fragments of palaces, temples, or treasures hinting at royal wealth. But overall, such discoveries are like a handful of salt cast into the sea, far from the solid evidence so many have hoped for. Not only was Solomon rich and great, countless other thrilling tales also surround him, the treasure of hundreds of tons of gold he supposedly possessed, the ring that allowed him to command 72 demons from hell and rule the world, and even a shuttle-like craft like a modern spacecraft that could carry him swiftly through different dimensions. For ages, these claims have remained riddles without answers, questions hidden in the fog of shadow. And even with today's advanced science and technology, we still perceive only a faint glimmer of light somewhere in the distance. King Solomon, beyond the extraordinary intellect described in the Bible, is also said to have been remarkably quick in gaining access to new technologies. Many hypotheses suggest that he skillfully approached friends from another planet in order to build a spacecraft that would make travel more convenient than ever. Ancient biblical traditions also reveal that the great Jewish king possessed a magnificent flying vessel. According to the Kebra Nagast, the Glory of the Kings, a major ancient Ethiopian text, Solomon was visited by the Queen of Sheba, who crossed the Red Sea to reach Jerusalem. Her aim was to see the sacred Ark of the Covenant, and above all, she was captivated by stories of Solomon's wisdom. In time, she fell into love with the king, and after returning to her own realm, gave birth to Menelik, the first Solomon's son. One passage from the text states King Solomon flew through the air to visit Makeda and his son Menelik in a chariot of heaven. The king and all his attendants sat upon that vehicle without suffering any pain. They did not sweat or grow weary, and they traveled a great distance, one that would take at least 3 months within a single day. Though the description of Solomon's shuttle is rather faint, it is enough to lead modern minds toward the image of a spacecraft because its speed is almost beyond belief. If we limit ourselves to the human capabilities of the ancient world, creating such a vehicle would seem unimaginable. There are also theories claiming that Solomon's shuttle was simply the flying carpet he received as a gift. Among the many ideas about flying carpets, the story that connects directly to Solomon appears the most credible. Yet, if Solomon's shuttle truly was a flying carpet, it conflicts with what the ancient text implies. Traveling at such extreme speed without any protection would inevitably cause exhaustion. But the passage says they did not sweat at all. For that reason, the flying carpet explanation is not especially convincing. After many years of research, quite a few historians argue that the biblical story of Solomon's 500 tons of pure gold, valued at $3 trillion, is only a myth, but it is far harder to dismiss the possibility of an ancient flying craft associated with Solomon. Because according to many old texts, he is repeatedly portrayed as one of the individuals who possessed a machine capable of flight. One striking detail in the stories about Solomon is the tale of 72 demons who helped him build the temple. This text is not recognized as an official biblical canon, yet it has still sparked deep suspicion and debate. Written in Greek, it tells how Solomon built his temple by commanding demons through a magical ring. According to the story in the so-called Testament of Solomon, as the king was building the temple in Jerusalem, a demon named Ornius appeared at dusk. Ornius would steal wages and food from a young man. The youth reported that the demon had been tormenting him. Enraged, Solomon prayed to God for help in punishing the demon. Then the archangel Michael gave the king a magical ring and a seal engraved with the symbol of a 5-pointed star, granting immense power. With the ring and seal in hand, Solomon gave the ring to the young man and told him to throw it at the demon when it returned to harass him, and then bring the demon before the king. Solomon captured Ornius through the ring's power and forced him to serve in building the temple, assigning him to cut stone. One day, Solomon even allowed Ornius to use the ring to summon Beelzebub, the prince of hell. At first, Beelzebub treated Solomon with contempt, but before the strength of the seal and the ring, even Beelzebub had to submit. Do these thrilling stories have any connection to Solomon's shuttle? A new hypothesis emerges. Could Solomon have used that unique magical ring to summon and operate a vehicle of movement far more advanced than anything of his time? If, as ancient writings suggest, Vimana Ezekiel's wheel and the flying carpet were all objects associated with demons, then could Solomon have exploited that one-of-a-kind ring to force demons from the underworld to take the form of a shuttle carrying him swiftly through different dimensions? If so, then this world may truly contain mysterious entities that cannot be explained through scientific study. However, in the past decade and more, modern humanity, armed with dramatically advanced science and technology, has continued searching for evidence of Solomon's kingdom and the shuttle he used. New discoveries may yet reshape the way we understand the ancient world described in the Bible. The search for Solomon's world did not begin in Israel, but in Petra, an ancient trading hub built 2,000 years ago on the Jordanian plateau. In the mountains around Petra, there are still ruins linked to an ancient kingdom called Edom. For over a decade, archaeologist Thomas Levy has studied the development of this kingdom. The stories of Vimana Ezekiel's wheel, the flying carpet, and King Solomon's shuttle are legends that continue to trouble the modern mind. All of them appear in some of the oldest texts on Earth, and yet all seem to vanish into history as though they never existed. If such modern technologies were truly applied thousands of years ago, why did they disappear instead of continuing to develop beyond the spacecraft-like objects already mentioned? There are many other artifacts tied to the idea of ancient aerospace murals, resembling modern astronaut suits, or archaeological models that resemble modern aircraft. Do all these artifacts, along with the hypotheses about ancient spacecraft, attempt to prove that Earth once hosted an advanced prehistoric civilization, or that a highly developed extraterrestrial civilization visited our planet and helped the people of that era? The universe is 82 billion years old, and observations suggest it spans about 93 billion light-years in diameter. Conservative estimates place the number of stars in the universe at roughly 20 trillion, with the Sun being a fairly ordinary star. Most stars have their own planets, and those planets have their own moons. By that logic, the existence of another solar system, another Earth somewhere in the cosmos, is an inevitable possibility. Whatever the truth may be, it seems that everything modern humanity understands is only the surface of a vast iceberg. Film is one of the most powerful engines driving popular culture. What appears on screen often lodges deep in our minds. And ancient Egypt, one of the most prosperous and dazzling civilizations ever to exist on this planet, has always been a magnet for human curiosity, especially because of its endless mysteries. Through the silent flow of time across violent upheavals of history, the pyramids of Egypt still stand proudly amid sun wind and salty sand never fully buried. They are even recognized as the most intact, surviving wonder of the ancient world, one of humanity's greatest journeys across cultures and civilizations. Yet despite their preservation, the Giza Plateau remains one of the most secret-laden places on Earth. As archaeological evidence gradually emerges under the blazing sunlight of Giza, modern researchers grow increasingly unsettled. Have our long-held beliefs about the pyramids and about ancient Egypt as a whole really been accurate? And what other mysteries on the Giza Plateau have yet to be spoken of? The Lost Black Pyramid. Many people may mistakenly believe that Egypt has only a handful of pyramids. After all, without modern machinery, it is hard to imagine how pyramids could have been built by human strength alone. Yet in reality, spread across the vast sandy deserts, as many as 118 pyramids of all sizes have existed and still exist today. Modern attention seems to focus almost entirely on the three largest pyramids in the Giza complex, Khufu Khafre and Menkaure. Not only do they align in a remarkably straight line on the ground, they are also said to align with the three stars of Orion's belt. However, ancient texts describe another structure aligned with the three main pyramids on the Giza Plateau, known as the Black Pyramid, and yet in truth, almost no one on Earth knows of it. So where has the Black Pyramid been throughout the flow of history? Was it buried beneath desert dust and sand, erased from the planet beyond the reach of human knowledge? The Black Pyramid first entered human awareness around the middle of the 18th century, thanks to a Danish sea captain and explorer named Frederick Louis Norden. Norden was considered a prodigy in his time. At just 14, he entered the Royal Danish Naval Academy. In an era when human science and technology were still limited, the ability to recreate maps accurately through drawings could make exploration far easier. And Norden had been gifted with something invaluable, a natural talent for cartography. That talent earned him the king's attention and gave him opportunities far beyond those of his peers. Before long, in 1737, the Danish king sent him on an expedition to explore mysteries stretching from Ethiopia through Egypt to Sudan. Norden would serve as the king's official representative in the regions he traveled, observing, recording, and recreating what he saw people monuments and architecture through detailed hand-drawn maps. Norden's expedition reached Egypt in June 1737, but the journey ahead was anything but smooth. As they traveled farther south, the weather suddenly turned unfavorable. Soon after, the ship carrying the expedition suffered an accident. Yet the expedition's misfortune became Norden's good fortune, turning the child prodigy into a legend in the years to come. Stranded in Egypt, Norden had more time to observe and document his surroundings with painstakingly detailed hand-drawn maps. At that time, Norden's records were entirely new, far beyond what Europeans believed they understood. When the expedition returned in 1738, Norden's maps spread widely across the continent he lived in. His discoveries, experiences, and detailed cartographic drawings were later published in a book titled Travels in Egypt. The data recorded in that book left researchers baffled. On page 120, Norden described a mysterious pyramid that had never existed within humanity's known framework. He wrote, in essence, the main pyramids lay to the east and southeast of Giza. There were 4 pyramids worthy of the greatest interest. Even though 7 or 8 others could be seen in the area, they were nothing compared to the principal pyramids. He noted that the largest were the 2 northern pyramids, about 500 feet high and perpendicular to each other. The other 2 were much smaller, but possessed distinctive features that still demanded admiration. Norden reserved particular attention for the 4th main pyramid, describing it in detail. It lacked an outer casing and was sealed like the others, yet what set it apart was its summit, formed by a single, enormous stone slab that seemed to serve as a platform. He stated that this 4th pyramid was built from a black stone, harder than ordinary granite, and that it appeared more isolated standing farther to the west than the others. Stop for a moment. 4 pyramids aligned, not just 3, as we are taught to believe. It sounds absurd, yet Norden asserted exactly that in his writings and hand-drawn maps, a splendid black pyramid once stood on the Giza Plateau. Modern scholars, however, have often refused to accept it. Many argue it was merely a mistake by the Danish explorer that such a pyramid never existed. Debate erupted around Norden's records. Most people insisted he must have misidentified secondary ruins at Giza as a 4th pyramid. Some even suggested he confused one of the satellite pyramids surrounding the 3 main monuments with a true pyramid. But this explanation runs into a contradiction. Norden specifically described the structure as made of a black stone, harder than granite, while satellite pyramids were built of sandstone. A visual misreading might happen, but a mistake in identifying the material is far harder to accept. It is unlikely Norden forgot the satellite pyramids because he explicitly stated that nothing compared to the 4 principal pyramids. Before Norden's records were published, European knowledge of Egypt and its mysterious pyramids was little more than vague impressions drawn from ancient biblical references or the imagination of historians. Egypt remained a dream they longed to decipher. It also seems Norden was not the first to mention a black pyramid on the Giza plateau. Shortly before him, in the late 17th century, beginning in 1674, a Dutch explorer named Cornelis de Bruijn began the legendary journey of his life. Over 20 years traveling through territories in West Asia and Northeast Africa, he gained new knowledge about people and architecture. When he returned to Europe in 1698, de Bruijn published an illustrated book about his remarkable travels, astonishing readers with scenes they had never before witnessed. De Bruijn's writings reshaped European perceptions of new lands, including Egypt. Though he was not the first European to set foot there, he was among the first to stay observe and take time to study the people and landscape before Norden. Earlier, Europeans had mostly passed through Egypt on the way to the Holy Land without stopping as de Bruijn did. He produced some of the first sketches of pyramid interiors and detailed descriptions of the Great Sphinx. And surprisingly, de Bruijn and Norden, 2 men of different nationalities, unconnected and unable to communicate, arrived at the same impression of Giza. In de Bruijn's account, there were not 3, but 4 principal pyramids on that plateau of mystery. Could both explorers have made the same foolish mistake about a pyramid that never existed? If a 4th pyramid truly once stood there, how could it have been counted so precisely, and where would it be now while the other 3 still stand under the blazing sun? There are many theories. Some suggest that over time, the 4th pyramid may have been dismantled in the early 18th century, its stones reused to build the nearby city of Cairo. Others believe its remains may still lie somewhere beneath the dense sands of the Egyptian desert. Whatever the truth, if the 4th pyramid truly existed, it would likely bring many secrets into the light. Researchers have searched for it for centuries, yet no valuable clue has been found. One major problem makes the Black Pyramid's mystery so difficult to solve. There are simply too few sources. Information about this vanished pyramid survives only in scattered notes from a handful of explorers and a few ancient texts. Yet hope revived as science and technology advanced more rapidly than ever. Satellite technology, widely used since humanity entered the 21st century, has allowed scientists to survey land from thousands of miles away. Machines have replaced human limits, reaching promising research sites that had never been explored. Within the first decade of the 21st century, scientists used these modern technologies to probe Egypt's hidden past. An underground ancient Egyptian settlement was discovered waiting to be explored. Even this alone suggests that most of the truth about ancient Egypt remains buried beneath desert sand. By the end of 2020, historians and archaeologists launched an excavation project in a desert near Luxor, about 300 miles south of Cairo. What they uncovered beneath the sand left them speechless. As the thick layers of desert sand were brushed away, stacked mud brick walls began to appear. Soon the outline of a large city emerged, complete rooms separated by walls gradually taking shape before their eyes. The excavation team also found many everyday tools and objects. This may be the largest ancient city in Egypt ever discovered by modern humanity. The city was built by one of the greatest rulers of ancient Egypt, Amenhotep III, the 9th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, who reigned from 1391 to 1353 BCE. It was the largest administrative and industrial settlement of the Egyptian Empire in its era, located on the west bank near Luxor. The city had three main districts: Amenhotep III's royal palace, and the empire's administrative and industrial centers. Its winding walls are among the rare architectural features in ancient Egyptian design, used mainly in the late 18th dynasty. A large number of molds for producing amulets and refined decorative elements were also found evidence of widespread ornament production for temples and tombs. For a long time afterward, the Egyptian government called the site the Lost Golden City because of the immense quantity of jewelry and finely crafted pottery unearthed there. According to Egyptian archaeologists, the discovery of this ancient city will help humanity see more clearly how Egyptians lived at the height of their empire's wealth and shed light on some of the greatest mysteries in human history. But it may not end there. Deeper excavations in the area could reveal what truly happened 3,500 years ago, or perhaps even further back in time. Time moved on. Old stories gradually slipped into oblivion, while true events slowly turned into hazy legends shaped by human retelling. In the 19th century, archaeologists made a noteworthy discovery, a story carved into the wall of a temple built long before their time. It spoke of an ancient Egyptian sea voyage to a mysterious land said to exist somewhere in the universe. Yet what could desert-dwelling people possibly have to do with the sea? The tale was eventually set aside because scientists believed it was not historical truth. Yet it still left modern minds troubled, haunted by the mysteries of the distant past. Let us try to travel back in time to around the 5th century BCE, to the account of the Greek historian Herodotus, who described a mysterious underground labyrinth he claimed to have seen during his journey to Egypt. The bewildering complexity of the passages from room to room, from courtyard to courtyard, was an endless marvel to me. Each chamber was divided by a stone wall. The walls were covered with various figures. Beyond the rooms were courtyards paved with exquisitely worked white marble surrounded by a colonnade. At the time, Herodotus's words drew little attention because people tended to believe that an Egyptian labyrinth of such scale was unrealistic, something that could exist only in myth. As a result, many later scholars dismissed the Greek historian's account outright. Then in 2008, a ground-penetrating radar survey of the Hawara Desert, about 50 miles south of Cairo, stunned scientists. The presence of underground structures led researchers to claim that the greatest labyrinth of ancient Egypt had been found. And many believed these remains might be what was left of the Black Pyramid, a monument that seemed to exist only in legend. However, for reasons unknown, these findings were reportedly forbidden from being made public by the Egyptian authorities. The excavation was forced to stop halfway, and everything slowly faded into silence once again. This raises a troubling question. If a clue to a colossal labyrinth had been uncovered, why was it not pursued and investigated further? How could an archaeological site not yet thoroughly explored threaten a nation's security? Or was it because the truth was so staggering it could alter humanity's history itself? To this day, no one has offered a precise answer. Despite centuries of archaeological research, there is one truth we cannot deny. Egypt has always remained a mystery within the flow of history. And the so-called Fourth Pyramid, along with other legends of the Giza Plateau, still leaves people unsettled whenever it is mentioned. Remember what the Danish explorer Norden wrote, that the Fourth Pyramid was built from a black stone harder than ordinary granite. And in ancient Egyptian culture, black granite symbolized rebirth. Black was the color of the Nile, and of darkness of the underworld itself, from which the sun would rise, as though reborn after a long night of disappearance. For that reason, this stone was often used for sarcophagi and important artifacts within pyramids. So why build an entire Great Pyramid out of this black stone? Did the Black Pyramid carry a unique meaning that could not be replaced? Perhaps the ancient Egyptians feared that ordinary pyramids would be worn away beneath the sun and the harshness of the elements, and so they built a special pyramid of black stone. Perhaps they hoped it could be reborn like the sun, so that even if it vanished into the endless flow of time one day, it would return whole and intact. The chambers inside the pyramids of Khafre and Menkaure lie below ground level. Khafre's pyramid has only 2 simple chambers with sealed ceilings. Menkaure's pyramid, meanwhile, contains a series of smaller yet more intricate rooms and passageways, one of which features meticulous decoration. The final finishing work was carried out from the top downward. As laborers moved down along the pyramid's sides, the construction ramps were gradually dismantled as well. Most of the tunnels within the Giza pyramids remained largely intact until the Middle Ages. At that time, systematic quarrying demanded fine white limestone for buildings in Cairo. People realized it was easier to transport the casing stones from the pyramids than to extract new material. Fortunately, a small portion of the outer casing at the summit of Khafre's pyramid still remains today, faintly revealing a glimpse of its original appearance. Exploration and mapping of the Giza Plateau began in the 17th century and continues to this day. Even so, what we already know is enough to leave people stunned by this extraordinary achievement. And that leads to a question. If the pyramids were built for ordinary burial purposes alone, would ancient people really spend decades, perhaps even centuries, constructing something like this? The answer is likely no. A structure that demanded such immense effort surely served a purpose greater than that. Many scientists believe the 3 main pyramids on the Giza Plateau were colossal power plants supplying electricity to the civilizations around them. Because in truth, no mummies have ever been found inside these 3 monumental structures, even after centuries have passed. We usually learn that Edison and Tesla helped bring electricity into widespread use in the 20th century, and so we naturally assume that was the moment electricity entered human history. Yet in Iraq, in 1934, a ceramic jar was found together with a copper cylinder and a long iron rod. When these artifacts were used in combination with a certain liquid acid, an electrical reaction was produced. This battery was dated to around 2,000 years old, or perhaps even older. People of that time, it is said, could not have possessed such advanced knowledge. It sounded too absurd. And so scientists treated it as nothing more than a coincidental archaeological curiosity. However, scattered archaeological evidence of similar objects in Egypt has left scientists shaken. Perhaps electricity had been used long ago, back in the age of the ancient pharaohs. The original form of the pyramids was not like what we usually see today. One hypothesis suggests that at least 3 of the colossal pyramids on the Giza Plateau were once covered in a polished layer of white limestone outside the stone core. Smoothed and refined with sharp, clean edges, the pyramids would have resembled gigantic mirrors reflecting the blazing sun. The great earthquake of 1303 caused the outer casing to crack and fall away, stripping the pyramids of their original appearance. What we see today, then, is essentially the inner core. The purpose of that white casing has long intrigued researchers. Heat insulation simply to keep a mummy from getting too hot or too cold seems unlikely as the true explanation. Looking deeper, the casing was made of white Tura limestone, which contains no magnesium. Today, that material is commonly used in power plant construction because it is an excellent electrical insulator, crucial for preventing internal electricity from leaking outward. Was it truly mere coincidence that the ancients used such a material to build pyramids? Moreover, the massive stone blocks were fitted so tightly that even a razor blade could not slip between them. Could this precise construction have been intended to prevent electrical energy from escaping into the surrounding environment? And it does not end there. The interior surfaces of the pyramids were also made from another type of limestone called dolomite. This stone contains small amounts of metallic crystals and quartz, two components famously linked to optimizing electrical transmission. Next, the corridors and tunnels inside the pyramids, often understood as ventilation pathways, were built from granite that has slight natural radioactivity. Granite would ionize the air inside the pyramid, increasing conductivity. This would make the pyramid resemble an electrical cable, a conductive core on the inside, and an insulating shell on the outside. The Giza Pyramid complex was built atop underground water-bearing limestone layers, and the voids between them held large quantities of water. When groundwater was pushed upward, these saturated layers could transmit electrical energy toward the surface. Specifically, the massive flow of the Nile passing through rock cavities could generate what is described as a physical current. The tunnels inside the Giza pyramids would then function like granite conductors, energized by these currents. This would mean that, thanks to the materials used and the pyramid's distinctive architecture, an electromagnetic field formed deep beneath the pyramids could be conducted upward and then radiated outward to neighboring regions. It is believed that in the distant past, a highly conductive device once sat at the pyramid's apex, where today there is only a strange-looking empty space. From the top, electricity was supposedly transmitted wirelessly to tall towers built around the pyramids, distributing power to other areas. This hypothesis seemed even more convincing when a hidden chamber concealed within the pyramid for thousands of years was reportedly discovered in 1993. Archaeological evidence suggested that the chamber had been deliberately hidden by ancient architects. Not until 2011 did people gain access to it using a miniature camera. Astonishingly, the camera revealed carefully crafted copper wiring inside. More importantly, there were also drawn symbols resembling a wiring diagram like an electrical schematic within the chamber. Take a look at the batteries modern people use today, from the batteries used for large power plants to the tiny cells inside the wristwatch you wear. Every day, copper is essential for generating electrical energy. Yet even with evidence seemingly in plain sight, many still insist that the materials used in the pyramids were chosen purely by coincidence. If you look deeper, another intriguing point emerges. The technology of generating electrical fields in pyramids was rediscovered and studied by the genius inventor Nikola Tesla in the early 20th century. Tesla viewed Earth as one plate of a capacitor. The ionosphere, sitting roughly 80 to 800 kilometers above Earth, forms the second plate. Recent measurements indicate the voltage between these plates is about 400,000 volts. If humanity could control and harness the discharge between them, it would have an infinite source of energy, much like the dream of controlling lightning during a thunderstorm. Based on that principle, Tesla said his invention could deliver endless free energy to any location on Earth. He believed that by building wireless transmission towers, anyone anywhere on the planet could obtain electricity simply by inserting a device's conductor into the ground and tuning its frequency to resonate with the transmission tower. To realize his theory, Tesla did not build an ordinary communications tower system as demanded by others. Instead, he built a wireless power transmission tower called Wardenclyffe on Long Island, New York. Wardenclyffe was also said to be built over water-bearing rock layers, rich in underground ions, similar to the pyramid's location. It had the form of an octagonal pyramid, topped with a half-sphere dome. Negative charge from below the tower's base would move upward and accumulate at the dome's peak. Tesla used a transformer generating extremely high voltage to stimulate the tower's discharge. According to accounts from New York residents, on many nights in 1903, they saw Wardenclyffe emit enormous artificial lightning bolts stretching for tens of kilometers, lighting the sky so brightly that people aboard ships in the Atlantic could read newspapers at night. Just as Tesla claimed the waves generated by these energy transmitters would become the planet's greatest energy wells. Tragically, after a massive explosion, nearly all of the genius inventor's achievements were destroyed. In mid-1908, in Tunguska, a remote region of Siberia, Russia, an airburst with an estimated energy equivalent of 10 to 20 million tons of explosives burned and uprooted 60 million trees across an area of 2,150 square kilometers. This greatest explosion on Earth in the 20th century was said to have been caused by Tesla himself. He supposedly produced terrifying energy transmitted from Wardenclyffe all the way to Tunguska as a test of his theory. In 1915, 7 years after the Tunguska event, Tesla stated, "The practical transmission of electrical energy without wires and the production of destructive effects at a distance is undoubtedly possible. I have designed wireless transmission towers. My skill has advanced so far that effects of great destruction can be transmitted to any previously determined point on the Earth with high precision." More recently, it was also discovered that in early 1908, just months before Tunguska, Tesla visited the U.S. Library of Congress several times to study maps of central Siberia. It is very possible he calculated and selected Tunguska, a remote wilderness, as the destination point for energy transmission in his experiment. Sadly, the ideas Tesla left unfinished were permanently confiscated by the U.S. government after his death. If Tesla had succeeded, what would the world look like today? Surely the transmission of electrical energy would be completely different from what it is now. For centuries, we have tended to view pyramids as nothing more than massive tombs for pharaohs. Yet there is far too much real-world evidence that forces modern people to doubt what they think they know. Why are there no mummies in the main pyramids? Why are the materials used to build these colossal wonders the very things needed for conducting electricity? Why is there no trace of soot deep inside the underground tunnels? These questions compel us to reconsider carefully the pyramid's true purpose. Even if these mysteries continue to slip away from human understanding one day, the truths will surely be brought into the light. The mysteries of the Giza Plateau are not contained only within its colossal pyramids, they are said to exist beneath the Sphinx as well. The Sphinx and the pyramids appear side by side so often in the media that they seem inseparable. Yet people tend to focus far more on the pyramids than on the Sphinx. Few realize that the Great Sphinx of Giza is one of the rare surviving works of ancient architecture that still stands as a historical enigma, leaving scholars perplexed. To this day, it is considered the largest monolithic statue on the planet, measuring 73.46 meters in length and 20.12 meters in height. And according to rare photographs released in the past, there may be a tunnel leading towards secrets humanity has never uncovered. Yet our understanding of the Sphinx seems to stop there. Soon after Egypt's Supreme Council for Ancient Architecture allegedly buried and sealed off all information related to it. Why would they do that? Could it be that beneath the Sphinx lies a secret so immense it could reshape humanity's understanding of ancient Egypt? The Sphinx of Giza was first rediscovered in 1817 when a team of archaeologists, led by Giovanni Battista Caviglia, attempted to excavate the Sphinx's chest to complete the monument. It may sound implausible, but many researchers believe the original Sphinx was far more magnificent than the version we see on the Giza Plateau today. Decades later, an archaeological team led by Émile Barrès excavated the entire Sphinx between 1925 and 1936. But it was not only the statue's unbelievable size and mysterious beauty that drew researchers in. They could not understand how ancient people could have built such a monumental structure when scientific and technological capabilities were supposedly so limited. This fueled theories about a lost civilization and even extraterrestrials visiting Earth. Or perhaps it simply revealed how narrow modern human intelligence still is compared to a brilliant ancient world. Some scholars, such as Mark Lenner and Graham Hancock, have compared the Sphinx, the pyramids of Giza, and the Nile to the constellations of Leo Sirius and the Milky Way. Yet the deepest mysteries are said to lie within the Sphinx itself. Many historians claim there are hidden chambers inside it, perhaps even a legendary room containing the key to an underground Egyptian library, capable of decoding civilization and human history. The Greek historian Herodotus left records suggesting he truly entered a strange labyrinth on the Giza Plateau, so complex that it is hard to believe human hands created it. He was also among the earliest to mention an underground labyrinth beneath Giza. I saw it as a masterpiece. If someone placed the works of the Greeks and their labors beside it, they would be inferior in effort and cost compared to this labyrinth. Even the pyramids cannot be easily described in words, and each of them equals many great Greek works combined. Yet this labyrinth surpasses even the pyramids. According to Herodotus, the labyrinth lay slightly above Lake Moeris and nearly opposite the place known as the City of Crocodiles. Drawing on ancient accounts, Herodotus and others who claimed to have visited the labyrinth long ago, a 17th century German Jesuit scholar, Athanasius Kircher, attempted the first reconstruction of the labyrinth's layout in a form close to Herodotus's description. It contained 12 palaces with gates facing one another, 6 to the north and 6 to the south, joined one to the other, all enclosed by a single outer wall. Inside were 2 kinds of chambers, one set underground and another above them. The chambers numbered 3,1500 of each kind. The upper system of chambers we ourselves have seen. And strangely enough, Herodotus was not alone. Over the following centuries, many others echoed his belief. The Greek philosopher Strabo said he visited the labyrinth, calling it the Great Palace of Egypt. Around the same period, the historian Diodorus offered similar testimony about a splendid, luxurious labyrinth. Yet the mysteries of ancient Egypt were held down for centuries by the grip of desert sands. Not until the 4th century did the historian Ammianus Marcellinus write again about an underground labyrinth beneath Giza. According to him, the entrance hidden beneath the Sphinx had been blocked by rubble. The doorway was once operated by magicians, and now it was impregnable. Even more astonishing, according to the Arab historian al-Masudi, these secret underground chambers held knowledge capable of enlightening the human mind. In ancient oral tradition, the Hall of Records is described as a library buried somewhere in Egypt, and many believe it could lie beneath the mysterious Giza Sphinx, seated proudly as it watches over the pyramids. This Hall of Records was said to store ancient Egyptian knowledge on papyrus scrolls, and people even believed it could explain the history of the lost continent of Atlantis and reveal its location. In terms of importance, Egypt's Hall of Records is often compared to the Great Library of Alexandria, which preserved Greek knowledge. Mainstream scholars insist there is no proof the Hall of Records ever existed. Yet other researchers, including Robert Bauval and Thomas Dobek, believe it lies beneath the Sphinx. Some think it was built by ancient Egyptian civilization. Others argue it was created by an even older civilization, or more fantastically, that it has a direct connection to forces beyond Earth. And what if the Hall of Records is not beneath the Sphinx at all? What if a vast hidden library truly sits somewhere else in Egypt? Rare images of the Sphinx suggest that there may be multiple entrances leading inside. As early as 1733, explorer Charles Thomson reported a hole on the Sphinx's back. Not long after, the French archaeologist Vivant Dinon sketched a scene showing people emerging from a passage on the Sphinx's head. These openings are believed to connect to corridors leading into enormous underground chambers beneath the Sphinx chambers, linked to hidden libraries filled with ancient texts that could be pieced together to illuminate humanity's still unclear past. In the book, The Message of the Sphinx, authors Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval stated that the Egyptian government cooperated with American archaeologists to block any investigation around or beneath the Sphinx, preventing anyone from finding subterranean cavities or discovering what truly lies below it. The reason they suggested was likely fear that valuable documents not yet recovered might fall into the wrong hands. Some photographs appear to indicate the presence of shafts and corridors leading to unknown rooms beneath the Sphinx. In fact, it is said that a massive underground library was once discovered in Egypt only for the work to be halted by mainstream archaeologists and scholars. It was regarded as one of the greatest discoveries in ancient Egyptian studies, yet only a small number of people supposedly knew it existed. Although it could have been one of the most important finds of the century, for some reason, most mainstream scholars and Egyptologists allegedly worked to keep it hidden from the public. Could this be the oldest lost library of all? If such an archive truly exists, then Herodotus and Strabo may have been among the lucky few who entered and recorded the legendary labyrinth before it vanished forever into the current of history. If the labyrinth beneath the Sphinx were merely a fabrication, why would so many sources mention it? And why would modern people now deliberately ignore historical stories about the Sphinx? Perhaps that is only the surface. For centuries, there have always been people who tirelessly searched for the secret of the labyrinth beneath the Sphinx. The world-famous prophet Edgar Cayce, who through unconscious speech during sleep accurately predicted many events of the 20th century, such as the Great Depression, the Cold War, and the deaths of U.S. presidents, also made predictions about ancient Egypt. Cayce claimed the Sphinx is not 4,500 years old, as commonly believed, but as old as 10,000 years. He also insisted that the labyrinth beneath the Sphinx would definitely be discovered sooner or later. But pause for a moment. Does a labyrinth truly exist beneath the Sphinx? In the early 1990s, researchers John Anthony West and Robert Schoch conducted surveys of the terrain around the Sphinx. Their findings were widely presented in a documentary titled The Mystery of the Sphinx. The controversy would be far smaller if their evidence did not suggest the presence of tunnels and chambers beneath the Sphinx. It made the legendary archive thought to exist only in myth seem as though it might truly exist. Yet the path that almost reached the truth was left hanging reportedly due to intervention by the Egyptian authorities soon afterward. In 2008, a team of researchers from Belgium and Egypt launched a research project in Hawara. Using advanced ground-penetrating radar, they began detecting signs of tunnels and chambers below the ground. Statues and large halls forming rooms could have been remnants of an ancient city. Digging deeper, they reportedly discovered an underground labyrinth containing more than 3,000 rooms filled with hieroglyphs and astonishing drawings. This mysterious subterranean complex lay in Hawara, less than 100 kilometers from Cairo. Many believed it was the legendary Hall of Records, the key to understanding civilization and historical truth. Sadly, this extraordinary discovery was quickly pushed out of public view. The expedition's results were only briefly published in the scientific journal NRIAG that same year and later presented in a public lecture at Ghent University. The team's findings were then allegedly suppressed by Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities. Under the influence of Egypt's national security laws, he halted all information exchange about the discovery. Officially, authorities maintain that stories of the archive and labyrinth exist only in legend or in the human imagination. Zahi Hawass stated, "All our survey research shows that there is no temple passage or corridor underground. Yet despite later evidence, the Egyptian government has continued to deny what was allegedly found. It appears to some as though they are intentionally bending public perception about what lies beneath Egyptian soil, meaning the labyrinth under the Sphinx could remain secret forever. Even if researchers claim the underground complex exists, a major excavation would still be required in the future to explore this hidden trove more deeply. Many believe the treasures within the underground labyrinth could contain answers to countless historical mysteries and to ancient Egyptian civilization itself. Could it truly be the Hall of Records, an archive of immense knowledge? And is it precisely because of its significance that the Egyptian government decided to forbid deeper research and further excavation projects? One particularly striking detail is that almost no historical record describes the construction of the Sphinx. If the Sphinx really is 10,000 years old, as Edgar Cayce claimed, then it was built long before even ancient Egypt. Long ago, the Sumerians asserted they were the first to dominate the planet. In their ancient texts, their civilization was not created by humans alone, but also involved intervention by gods from heaven beings who brought advanced technological knowledge to accelerate humanity's development. Many people argue that there were no gods at all, only extraterrestrials visiting Earth. So what does this have to do with the Sphinx and the secret buried beneath it? In Sumerian legend, the god built a gateway leading to the place where his mysteries were stored. If that legend is true, then what lies beneath the Sphinx at Giza may not be only an archive, but an entire advanced city built by extraterrestrials, and discovering it could change humanity's future forever. That, perhaps, is why the Egyptian authorities would want to hide it. The Giza Plateau may truly be one of the most mysterious places on this planet. The labyrinth beneath the Sphinx, the true purpose of the pyramids, and the missing Black Pyramid are all riddles people continue struggling to decode despite immense difficulty and resistance. Do you believe Edgar Cayce's words that the labyrinth beneath the Sphinx will soon be excavated? Then believe as well that the Black Pyramid will be reborn like the sun hidden in darkness. Giza's mysteries are enough to show us that modern humanity's vision of ancient civilizations is still far too limited. Standing tall on the Giza Plateau, rising above the scorching dunes beneath the sun, are the three pyramids that have been famous around the world for centuries. The most striking of them is the Great Pyramid of Giza. At 146 meters high, it remained the tallest man-made structure on Earth for more than 4,400 years. Yet it seems that the pyramids' grandeur has also concealed the questions behind them. How long have they stood here? No one can say for certain. Why were they built? No one truly knows. The message the ancients meant to leave through these pyramids has still not been deciphered. And yet, by asking the right questions and thinking with care, we may begin, at least in part, to understand what our predecessors tried to convey. So let us begin right now to explore what the pyramids might truly be saying. For those who travel thousands of kilometers from every corner of the world to Egypt to see the Giza pyramids, the first feeling is often shock, overwhelmed by their majesty and mystery. People take photographs, explore the surrounding ruins, and listen with delight to stories about this ancient wonder of the world. But if you are a local who has lived near them all your life, seeing the pyramids from the day you were born, your feelings may change over time. They begin to feel ordinary, like skyscrapers in a city, nothing special at all. Only one day, when questions suddenly start to surface in your mind, do you sense something is not quite right. Why are they there? Why did they need to be so enormous? To answer these doubts, let us look briefly inside the Great Pyramid. After years of observation, researchers discovered that the ventilation shafts inside the pyramid are actually aimed at the stars. They align with multiple stars in the sky. This discovery was published by the well-known astronomer Virginia Trimble in 1964. The moment she visited Egypt, she suspected the pyramid's shafts might be pointing towards something. The pyramid itself is aligned very precisely with the cardinal directions east, west, south, and north, so the idea that the shafts lead toward specific targets seemed entirely plausible. Virginia calculated that the southern shaft of the King's Chamber points directly to the belt of the constellation Orion, and the northern shaft points to the North Star. When this was announced, Egyptologists partially accepted it, but it was not strongly supported. At the time, people did not even finish checking where the southern shaft of the Queen's Chamber pointed. Only later did they discover that it pointed to Sirius. However, this is not something that remains permanently true, because Earth undergoes precession, the slow, gradual change in the direction of its rotational axis. This motion is known as the precession of Earth, caused by torque within the Earth-Sun system. It directly affects the angle at which sunlight reaches Earth's surface. At present, this axis is tilted at 23.43 degrees. This tells us that Earth's axis does not always point toward the same star or the same pole. The clockwise wobble makes Earth move like a spinning top, completing a precessional cycle in about 25,770 years. On a human timescale, this top does not seem especially meaningful, but measured across geological time, it becomes highly significant, especially across ice age intervals. There is something else I want to share as well. The names King's Chamber and Queen's Chamber are not truly accurate. These labels came from Egyptologists who believed pyramids were tombs for pharaohs. Yet no mummy has ever been found in any of the three pyramids. People were never completely sure what the chambers were for, so the names simply stuck through habit. In ancient Egyptian belief, Orion and Sirius were the most important stars in their religion. According to Egyptian mythology, the gods descended from Orion and Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. A brief note on Orion, this constellation, has been known since antiquity. It is also called the Hunter because of its association with Greek myth. It represents the legendary hunter Orion, often depicted on star maps facing conflict with Taurus the bull, pursuing the seven sisters of the Pleiades, or chasing the hare Lepus alongside his two hunting dogs, represented by the nearby constellations Canis Major and Canis Minor. Many cultures have their own stories about Orion, But the most famous comes from Greek mythology, in which Orion is a mighty hunter son of the sea god Poseidon and Euryale, daughter of King Minos. Poseidon granted Orion the ability to walk on water. In Homer's Odyssey, Orion is described as a giant hunter armed with an unbreakable bronze club. Returning to Egypt, the Egyptians believed the gods came to earth in human form, saving and enlightening all of humanity. They firmly believed Orion was tied to the birth of the world. Countless ancient documents, books, and illustrations reflect this. When we look closely at coffins or the ceilings of tombs, the symbols of Orion and Sirius appear again and again. As for the pharaohs, they also held firmly to the belief that they were the rebirth of Horus, son of the gods Osiris and Isis. More than 400 ruling generations maintained this faith. Even more astonishing is that although there were over 400 generations of kings, archaeologists have found the tombs of only a handful. The most famous is Tutankhamun. So where are the hundreds of others? To this day, no one knows. All three pyramids contain no writing, drawings, or symbols inside or out. Drawing on Egyptological speculation, Robert Bauval, an engineer specializing in surveying and planning, noticed something strange when he visited the Cairo Museum in 1983. While looking at an aerial photograph of the three Giza pyramids, he felt a sudden professional discomfort. Why was the third pyramid so small and offset at an angle from the other two? The pyramids, he thought, should have formed a diagonal line. Pharaohs loved massive monuments that displayed their power. If you were the chief architect of the third pyramid, what would you do? Tell your king, "Sorry, your power isn't as great as the rulers before you, so your pyramid will be smaller." The pyramid's placement stops being baffling once you set it beside Orion. Among Orion's three prominent stars, there are also two large stars and one smaller star offset to the left. Bauval recognized the pyramid's offset in 1983 and published it in 1989. His correlation theory argued that the pyramids were intentionally built with that offset. It was not random as people assumed. This, he claimed, was a deliberate mimicry of Orion. Though the idea sparked outrage in archaeology, it did have a certain internal logic. But the theory contained a fatal weakness. The angle offset between the stars and the angle offset of the pyramids were not identical. That threatened to collapse everything. If only there were a way to shift the third pyramid into alignment. Or we could choose the harder path shift the stars themselves. It sounds impossible, yet in practice it can be done. Do you remember precession, the motion we mentioned earlier? The stars do not remain fixed in the same positions when viewed from Earth. They drift up and down over long cycles. So, Robert Bauval used astronomical simulation software to model the sky in the distant past and search for the stars' earlier alignment. The result was that as you go back in time, Orion not only sinks lower in the sky, but its angles change as well. And at around 10,450 BCE, the star's offset angle matched the pyramid's offset. Even more startling, this perfect match occurred precisely on the spring equinox. On that day, not only did the three stars and the three pyramids form an ideal correlation, but the Milky Way also mirrored the Nile on the southern horizon. On the spring equinox, the sun rises due east. Another famous structure also faces due east, the Sphinx. And remarkably, at that time, it would also have faced toward the constellation Leo. So what message were the Egyptians trying to convey through this astonishing convergence? First, the pyramids do not speak only through astronomy. They also speak through the language of the universe embedded in their proportions. This kind of message can cross barriers of language and culture, and it can survive for thousands of years if future generations measure and study it. Much like the stone circles of Avebury in England that model Earth, the pyramids may be delivering a message from the ancients: we were here. A highly advanced civilization once existed along the Nile 12,500 years ago, a glorious era when the gods came into the world and enlightened civilization in accordance with ancient Egyptian faith, and the three Great Pyramids stand as monuments preserving that imprint. Is our civilization today as advanced as theirs was? The answer may be no, because the more we develop, the more we discover, the larger the gap seems to become. Even now, we still cannot fully decode the pyramids, and we can only speculate about how the Great Pyramid was built. But placing the pyramids into their correct moment on the map may help humanity realign history and civilizations as they truly were. It would become yet another ancient monument that challenges the timeline proposed by evolutionary theory. And there may be a deeper meaning still, one we can quietly reflect on. Human beings carry three great questions through life. Where do I come from? Who am I? And where am I going? The ancient Egyptians believed human life on Earth is brief, but the future is eternal. They placed immense importance on the human body, believing that if the physical form were perfectly preserved, the soul would have a place to rest. After death, there would be a new life. They believed death was the beginning of true existence. When life departed from this world, the soul would sleep inside the tomb. And in the future, their God would return to awaken those sleeping souls and bring them all to the eternal heavenly realm. Perhaps we still do not understand everything. Perhaps we have not yet uncovered the full message the ancients left in the pyramids. But at the very least, we can see that it may take many more years before people today achieve anything comparable to the radiant civilization that once existed along the Nile. And there are still far too many mysteries surrounding this ancient wonder of the world waiting for us to explore. For 4,400 years, buried beneath the scorching sands of Saqqara Cemetery in Egypt, something lay untouched. Then in 2018, after years of searching, archaeologists uncovered a complete mysterious tomb, one no one had ever reached before. It was as if the story of the ancient world was rising again from the desert west of Cairo. Finding a tomb that is intact and undisturbed is a major breakthrough, one of the most important in decades of archaeology. Newspapers, television, social media, and archaeology enthusiasts all buzzed with excitement. The tomb was believed to belong to a high-ranking official of Egypt's 5th dynasty named Wadi. People hoped it would paint a vivid, accurate portrait of daily life in that era. So what was hidden inside this mysterious tomb? Typically, the resting place of the well-off consisted of two parts: an above-ground structure and a shaft leading down to an underground chamber where the deceased truly lay. According to belief, only if the body was protected could the soul be reborn. The above-ground portion was always carefully designed and beautifully decorated, showing what the owner wished to enjoy in the next life. In other words, the entire tomb functioned like a vast machine of resurrection, meant to ensure its owner could travel safely from this life to the next and live beautifully forever. Wadi's tomb was a family tomb. It included Wadi himself, his mother, his wife, and their 4 young children. It seemed he wanted his entire family to have a good afterlife too, to live eternally in the field of reeds, a paradise resembling the fertile land of Egypt that had raised them. But the journey to the next world was not so simple. A series of trials in the underworld awaited every soul. the first and most important, took place in the Hall of Judgment. There the soul would face Osiris, the god of death and rebirth. It had to stand before 42 judges and swear it had committed no unforgivable sins. The oath went like this: I did not lie, I did not steal, I did not kill. Then the purity of the heart would be decided by a set of scales. On one side was the feather of truth and justice, ma'at, and on the other was the human heart. If the scales tipped toward the heart, it would be devoured at once by a crocodile-headed demon named Amit. That person would not be reborn, they would die forever. But if the heart balanced perfectly with the feather, a verdict of innocence would be declared, and the journey to the field of reeds would begin. Setting Wadi's tomb aside for a moment, let us go west of it. Only 10 meters away was a very deep, ancient shaft. What do you think lay below the first shaft? Mummies' traps or burial treasures. Placed with the dead, archaeologists did find mummies. But they were the mummies of dozens of cats stacked one on top of another. By tradition, the Egyptians did not sacrifice just any animal at random. Such offerings were often bought from priests. So where did all those cat mummies come from? It is very possible Wadi himself had raised cats during his lifetime and distributed them to villagers throughout the Saqqara area. The villagers would then raise these cats and the generations that followed. As you may know, cats represented gods or goddesses in ancient Egyptian culture. So, throughout their lives, cats were treated like divine beings, fed well, prayed over, lacking nothing. People worshipped them and willingly offered amulets made of wood, stone, pottery, copper, and of course cat mummies too. They believed a mummy offering was worth far more than woodstone or even copper. There are many reasons the Egyptians revered cats. Much of that reverence came from faith and religious structure. The ancient Egyptians believed their gods and their rulers possessed cat-like qualities. Specifically, cats were seen as having two admirable temperaments. On one hand, they could be protective and loyal. On the other, they were resilient, independent, and fierce. That helps explain why the Egyptians created so many cat-like statues. The Giza Sphinx, 73 meters long with a human face and a lion's body, is perhaps the most famous example. We can also point to many Egyptian deities who took feline or near-feline forms. The earliest known cat deity in ancient Egypt was Mafdet, worshipped throughout the First Dynasty, around 3100 to 2900 BCE. Her renown was especially strong during the reign of Pharaoh Den. She was believed to protect the pharaoh's chambers from scorpion snakes and other dangers. Mafdet was represented with the head of a leopard and wearing leopard skin. In the pyramids of the Old Kingdom, Mafdet is mentioned as a guardian of Ra against venomous serpents. To uphold justice, she hunted at night and ensured the coming dawn. Royal tombs also contain depictions linking Mafdet's symbols with those of Anubis, suggesting she accompanied other gods as an executioner or hunter. Next is Bastet, the goddess of joy, protection, and good health, depicted with a cat's head and a woman's body. She was the daughter of Ra, wife of Ta, sister of Set, and mother of Mahes. Bastet had been worshipped as a deity since the Second Dynasty. Most mummified cats were dedicated to Bastet, who could be both nurturing and dangerous. Bubastis, an ancient delta city, became a major origin point for cat mummies, unsurprising, because it was Bastet's chief cult center. Many mummies were placed in cat-shaped coffins or rectangular coffins. Others were simply wrapped in linen and then painted to resemble a cat. In the tombs of pharaohs, Pepi I and Khafra stone vessels and seals bearing Bastet's name were found evidence that Bastet remained important through the 4th and 5th dynasties. A wall painting in one of the Saqqara burial areas depicts a small collared cat, suggesting African wildcats had been domesticated and kept in pharaonic chambers. Countless images represent Bastet as a seated cat, a cat with kittens, or a cat-headed goddess. Through such offerings, Egyptians prayed for life children, health, and protection. Finally, there is Sekhmet, daughter of Ra and sister of Bastet, a solar deity, depicted as a lioness, a goddess of raging power. Sekhmet led pharaohs in war and protected them, continuing that role even in the afterlife. That is why she appears on royal garments, symbolizing her function as a guardian. At the beginning of each year, Egyptians held an annual festival of drunkenness. They danced and played music to soothe Sekhmet and her wildness. Large amounts of alcohol were consumed ritually to imitate the extreme intoxication that once prevented Sekhmet from destroying humankind. This may also have been linked to averting catastrophic flooding at the start of the year. Yet the cat mummies were not the most astonishing discovery in that shaft. Amid the pile of cat mummies was one larger mummy conspicuously bigger than the rest, so large that archaeologists noticed it instantly. Holding it in their hands, they could already tell this was not a cat. No ordinary cat, not even a wild cat, reached this size. They brought the strange mummy back and analyzed it using scan images. Can you guess what creature lay among the cats? The answer was a lion cub. Do not underestimate what that means. According to recorded mummification discoveries, this was the first time a lion mummy had ever been found. Now, to understand why mummification mattered so deeply, we return to an ancient myth. One day, Osiris was killed by Set, cut into pieces and scattered across Egypt. Isis, a powerful sorceress, traveled the land to gather the pieces of her brother husband and bound them together with linen. In doing so, she revived Osiris, and together they conceived a son named Horus. When Horus grew up, he longed to avenge his father. Osiris became king of the underworld, the god of death and rebirth. The mummification process in ancient Egypt took 70 days, performed by priests who had to learn basic human anatomy. First, they removed the internal parts that decomposed quickly, starting with the brain. A priest inserted special tools through the nostrils and extracted fragments of brain tissue. This was considered a delicate technique, difficult and requiring great skill. Then they removed the organs of the abdomen and chest through an incision made on the left side of the belly. The heart was left in place because they believed it housed the soul. Other organs, such as the stomach, lungs, and intestines, were removed and preserved separately in containers or jars, today called canopic jars, and buried with the mummy. After removing the organs, the priests eliminated all moisture. They covered the body with a drying salt and placed packets of natron inside. Natron inhibited decay. Once the body was completely dried, they removed the packets and gently rinsed away remaining natron. The final result was a body that was extremely dry but still recognizable in form. To make the mummy appear more lifelike, they padded sunken areas with linen and other materials and added artificial eyes. Next came the wrapping. Each mummy required hundreds of yards of linen. The priests carefully wrapped long strips around the body, sometimes wrapping each finger and toe separately before covering the hands and feet. Amulets were placed between layers, and prayers were written on some of the linen. Priests often placed a mask among the head wrappings. Finally, they secured the shroud and added an outer wrapping of linen. The mummy was complete. It was placed in a coffin and sealed. Now back to Wadi's tomb. At last, archaeologists reached the bottom of the first shaft. Confusingly, it contained only a few pottery fragments and scattered bones, deeply disappointing. Fortunately, there were more shafts to investigate. In the next shaft, the team found not a few bones, but many. They were the bones of children and adolescents. Could they have been Wadi's children? If so, perhaps other family members lay in the remaining shafts. The third shaft was more than 2 meters deep and contained bones and skulls. This raised a troubling question. What could have caused an entire family to die so young? One hypothesis emerged. Wadi may have suffered a tragedy near the end of his life, something truly horrifying. By the researchers' reasoning, only one place remained that might answer everything: the fourth shaft, the final one in Wadi's tomb. In that last shaft, there was a passage about 1 meter wide on the western side. It led to a wooden coffin, Wadi's coffin. For the first time in more than 4,000 years, he saw the light again. The coffin was made of ordinary wood. The family had not been mummified, yet Wadi's bones seemed better preserved than the others. Though he was a man, his skull had some feminine features. He appeared to have been a refined man around 35 years old. Specialists discovered that some bones were deformed and that the skull had thickened signs that might point to his cause of death. The lower leg bones were also abnormal, with knees bending inward. Dr. Shaheen, an anthropologist who compared Wadi's bones with those of others in the tomb, believed the family may have suffered from illness. I think Wadi was sick. These bones are not healthy. Perhaps he endured a lot of pain. This bone could be a sign of anemia. We might also consider certain diseases or epidemics. The most likely possibility may be malaria. It affected the whole family because the mother's skeleton has a similar form. If that is true, it could reshape the history of ancient Egypt. And so the story of Wadi's tomb finally feels complete, yet many questions still remain unanswered. In a strange way, the search for the tomb's mystery has led us into unexpected new knowledge, new discoveries about the religious culture of ancient Egypt. Antarctica, a land of mysteries buried beneath centuries of eternal ice. Over the last more than 50 years, reports have repeatedly surfaced about strange pyramid-shaped structures, mysterious entrances leading deep into the ice, and unidentified flying objects above the Antarctic continent. Records of unusual events from the past have raised countless difficult questions about the coldest place on Earth. Some people go to Antarctica and claim to see things they were never meant to see. Something is clearly being hidden down there, something we still don't know. Could it be the remains of an ancient civilization that once flourished, a secret extraterrestrial base, or unimaginable research conducted between humans and non-human beings? In November 1995, a U.S. Navy pilot named Brian and his crew flew a C-130 at very low altitude over Marie Byrd Land, a region in West Antarctica. This area deep in the south was hosting 15 scientists conducting research. The C-130 approached their station from McMurdo Station, several hundred kilometers to the east. The mission was triggered by a mysterious disappearance. The scientists were supposed to contact McMurdo daily and report their findings, but for several days no signal had come through. The team consisted of personnel from national scientific organizations. If they truly vanished, the consequences could be serious. The conditions where they worked were extremely harsh. There were no dangerous predators nearby, so the idea that they had been attacked and forced away from the camp seemed nearly impossible. Even stepping outside without proper protection, a person couldn't survive more than an hour. The aircraft tightened its search pattern, circling in smaller and smaller loops to ensure no area was missed. The weather was clear, visibility was excellent, yet nothing was found. Finally, the C-130 landed. and a rescue team was ordered to enter the station. Normally, when a loud transport plane lands at a base, at least a few people would come out to see what's happening. But the place looked abandoned. The scientists had arrived only about a week earlier. Their storage had enough food, water, even snacks for more than a month. Yet now they were gone without a trace. There were no signs of theft or forced entry. The rescue team checked the communications room. All systems were working normally. They even used the same equipment to report back to McMurdo. No people found, no bodies. Everything appears normal. No evidence of conflict. Please advise what the team should do next. There was no clear next step. The rescue team returned to the aircraft and flew back to McMurdo. Before leaving the area entirely, they widened their search circles once more, just to be sure. Antarctica is dangerous. Every year people go missing or die there. In such a brutal environment, no one is completely safe. Then more than a week later, the missing scientists reappeared. Brian's rescue crew and the C-130 received an urgent order to return to Marie Byrd Land. The scientists had sent a distress signal, screaming that they wanted to get out immediately. What had happened? In today's world, Antarctica is the most isolated place on Earth. Human research has only reached a tiny fraction of the continent. 98% remains unexplored. No one truly knows what lies beneath ice that can be kilometers thick. Yet despite the harsh conditions and limited access, new discoveries, according to these claims, suggest signs of advanced non-human technology and unknown ancient civilizations. Some recent satellite images are said to show pyramid-like structures piercing through the ice. Some believe these pyramids form part of a global energy network, like the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. It is widely accepted that over 90 million years ago, Antarctica was once green and fertile. But scientists also say it has been frozen and uninhabitable for about 12 million years. So who could have built those pyramids? First look at the Pinkerton map. 1818 shows the region where Antarctica should be as empty, unmarked, unnamed, suggesting Antarctica was unknown at the time. Yet older maps appear to show Antarctica's geography accurately, and not as a frozen continent, but as a lush land, rich with plant life. Is that real one mysterious map from the 16th century is claimed to depict Antarctica's northern coastline as it was before being covered by ice? How could people map this in an era without modern instruments? As with many ancient mysteries, some argue a lost civilization once existed in Antarctica. Interest in a prehistoric Antarctic civilization grew among certain researchers after World War II. This idea is often supported through medieval maps and various geological or physical studies. In 1929, a map drawn on gazelle skin was found showing geographical features different from what we recognize today. It carefully depicts the northern coast of Africa, the southern coast of South America, and the northern coast of Antarctica. This is the Piri Reis map, one of the most mysterious artifacts in cartography, drawn on parchment by Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis in 1513. This map is praised for its detail and accuracy, especially for regions supposedly not well known at the time. It has therefore become the subject of controversy for nearly a century. It seems to portray Antarctica before its official discovery, leading some to speculate it reveals secrets inherited from lost civilizations. Piri Reis was a skilled naval officer and cartographer of the Ottoman Empire, born around 1465 to 1470 in Gallipoli. He began life at sea young, first as a state-backed privateer, then as a Navy officer rising to admiral. He joined major campaigns, including the Ottoman conquest of Egypt, 1517, and the siege of Rhodes, 1522. He collected maps from many sources: Europe, Arabia, China, India, and more. In 1513, he completed his famous world map and presented it to Sultan Selim I, claiming it was based on about 20 sources, some ancient and some contemporary. He wrote that he used a copy of a partial map by Christopher Columbus, now lost. The map includes Turkish and Arabic notes. It was stored in the royal treasury for years, then forgotten, until rediscovered in 1929 in the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul. Researchers later examined it and were astonished by its quality. The strange part isn't only how Piri Reis could map Antarctica 3 centuries before its discovery, it's why the map depicts Antarctica as if it were visible land, not ice-covered. In 1949, a joint British-Swedish scientific expedition conducted seismic sounding through 1.6 kilometers of ice. The results, according to the claim, match the coastline of Queen Maud Land, as shown on the Piri Reis map, suggesting it was charted before it was covered by ice. Another oddity, the Piri Reis map uses a projection referencing longitude and latitude, but history often credits accurate longitudinal mapping to later developments such as 18th century advances. So, did people understand Earth's spherical geometry earlier than we think mainstream science says Antarctic ice has existed for a very long time? If the map truly shows northern Antarctica before ice, then it implies data from an unimaginably ancient source far earlier than human civilization. Could the Piri Reis map have been assembled from maps made by an unknown civilization? In his 1979 book, Maps of the Ancient Sea, King's professor Charles Hapgood argued the Piri Reis map drew from older sources such as Minoan and Phoenician seafarers preserved in the libraries of Alexandria and Constantinople, later brought to Europe during the Fourth Crusade in 1204. If so, how could ancient people map Antarctica before it froze? And with such accuracy, this fuels speculation that advanced civilizations once existed and vanished. In 1953, a naval officer supposedly sent the map to a U.S. Army Map Research Center for comparison with modern charts. The claim says they concluded it was extremely accurate, so accurate it would require satellite-like surveying methods. That leads to the idea that an advanced civilization may have lived tens of thousands of years ago in Antarctica before it was buried under kilometers of ice. And where did they go? The narrators answer, perhaps they never left, perhaps they are still there deep beneath Antarctic ice. The Piri Reis map is not the only one. In 1737, French geographer Philippe Boitier published his own map of Antarctica, very detailed but controversial. Boitier's Antarctica appears split into 2 landmasses, surrounded by highly detailed coastlines, which doesn't match modern depictions. Even the map's title is intriguing, suggesting southern lands between the Tropic of Capricorn and the South Pole would usher in a new era of discovery. Confusion grows because some versions list the publication date as September 5, 1739, while many sources cite 1737. No one in this narrative can explain the meaning of that 2-year discrepancy. Boitier was considered a pioneer of professional cartography in the early 18th century, combining geology exploration reports, missionary accounts, and astronomical observations to infer geography. Some of his conclusions aligned with later discoveries like Alaska and the Bering Sea, while others were wrong, such as his idea of a southern sea at the center of the South Pole. Still, Boitier's map allegedly captured ancient Antarctic geography, as if from a time when there was less ice. More interestingly, it depicts a frozen waterway along the Transantarctic Mountains, dividing Antarctica into two regions, West and East Antarctica. In Hapgood's 1966 work, he suggested Buache might have obtained traces of ancient advanced knowledge, some even linking it to extraterrestrial capability, to see geography and map it. Others think Buache simply refined his own hypotheses using older maps and scattered reports of southern icebergs and a distant southern continent. But ultimately, we still don't truly know what lies beneath Antarctic ice in prehistoric times. So, we cannot be sure Buache was right. Even Piri Reis may not be perfectly accurate. However, the story is not only about ancient maps. We return to the incident from the beginning. Brian's C-130 was dispatched again to Marie Byrd Land to evacuate the scientists who had reappeared. When the aircraft arrived, the team saw the scientists had already packed essential gear and ran toward the plane like they believed something would kill or torture them if they didn't leave immediately. They boarded in absolute silence. No one spoke to anyone, not even a word. Even when the crew asked what had happened, nobody answered. For the 3-hour flight back, the silence was suffocating. When the C-130 landed at McMurdo, the scientists were told they would transfer to another aircraft. But they seemed unwilling to move. Someone had to come on board, unbuckle them, and physically guide them out one by one. They had clearly witnessed something and appeared to be suffering severe PTSD. PTSD, as defined today, is a set of responses that can occur after experiencing or witnessing a traumatic event that threatens life or safety. It can follow accidents, assault crime, war torture, or disasters such as wildfires and floods. Most people have some post-traumatic reactions, but for some, the symptoms do not fade and instead disrupt life for weeks or longer. So, the scientists walked onto the second plane like zombies and then disappeared from public view. Their research equipment was placed in a large storage facility and locked down tightly. The rescue team was ordered not to enter under any circumstances. All other returned equipment was isolated and sealed, then transported elsewhere. Only later, the story claims, did people learn it was sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, a base associated in UFO lore with classified material relating to unidentified flying objects from 1947 to 1969. Brian's crew was summoned to the command office. 2 men in civilian clothes had arrived from Washington, D.C. They warned the crew do not speak about the incident to anyone, not even family. No one went missing. No rescue mission occurred. Nothing they experienced was real. The crew accepted this. It wasn't the first time they had been forced into silence. And in that very room about 10 years earlier, a similar meeting had occurred, not about what was on the surface, but about what the crew allegedly saw deep underground. In 2003, a Navy SEAL team was sent from McMurdo to the Beardmore Glacier. Officially, it was routine reconnaissance. In reality, the story says it was an escort mission, protect scientists collecting sensitive information, and extract them safely. The SEAL leader nicknamed Spartan 1 told the team the operation was critical, protect the scientists at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing their lives. As they neared the landing zone, they reportedly saw the top of a black octagonal structure protruding from the snow. The team led the scientist to a massive door, tens of meters tall, engraved with strange shapes. Some thought it looked like a star map. The door also bore a triangle with 2 diagonal lines crossing its center, a symbol found in many ancient cultures. Journalist Linda Moulton Howe, who interviewed Spartan 1 and other witnesses, showed him a photo of a coin found in Mexico City in 1993 bearing similar symbols. The huge door, thick as a meter, opened easily as the SEALs entered. Once it closed, everything fell into an eerie silence. The vast space and unnatural quiet made it terrifying. It took a long time to traverse the corridor. The walls emitted a soft blue glow, gentle yet ominous, and contained symbols resembling Egyptian hieroglyphs. When the scientists asked how large the place was, they were told 2.7 million square meters, nearly the area of a small country. This was an enormous complex deep under the ice and supposedly only one of many across Antarctica. At that time, the giant door was the only entrance. Years later, other entrances were found reachable only by extremely large submarines traveling under the ice deep into the continent. The deeper levels, the story claims, were not under human control. Everyone involved was ordered to remain silent. Now, once again, people were being threatened about spreading unverified information, Brian included. Brian had flown countless Antarctic missions since 1980, mostly resupply and transport. But one special mission changed everything. He was ordered to urgently evacuate an injured scientist from Davis Station, across from McMurdo, taking a route over mountains highly unusual. The crew flew straight through restricted airspace above a secret air sampling station marked as a no-fly zone. Their lives were at risk for violating it. But what Brian remembered most wasn't the danger. It was what he saw: a hole in the ice more than 90 meters wide near that secret station. It was clear significant activity had been happening there for years. The crew couldn't understand why such a massive ice pit existed in the middle of nowhere. After returning safely to McMurdo, the crew was summoned again. A new officer questioned their decision to violate restricted airspace. Brian argued they had no better option. The patient would have died otherwise. The officer paced and thought, then decided not to prosecute on one condition: the crew would be under strict monitoring and must never reveal what they'd seen. No formal NDA was signed, but Brian felt uneasy. He had seen UFOs and strange phenomena so often in Antarctica that it felt routine until it didn't. Months later, Brian overheard people talking about that secret station and the massive hole, speaking of trips there to meet special guests. Curious, he approached and asked. They told him the guests were not human and that the massive hole was an entrance to a secret base where humans and extraterrestrials were cooperating on a special project. Humans were learning from them. Sometimes human scientists even use themselves as test subjects. So, did the scientists from Marie Byrd Land also become human test subjects? If that were true, it's not hard to imagine the horrors they might have endured. That might explain why the moment they had a chance, they screamed and begged to go home. There are so many strange stories about Antarctica that they can't all fit into one short video. If you want to go deeper into today's story or any other, let me know in the comments. The Antarctica story is always vague and lacks the certainty it should have. But as long as Earth remains, humans will keep exploring. Learning something new is never a waste.